The gift, the morning of Independence Day in India, had always carried a special kind of electricity. The air itself seemed heavier, vibrating with the memory of history and the weight of sacrifice. Across the nation, people woke before sunrise, filling streets, balconies, and open fields with tricolor flags. Old songs drifted from radios, children painted their faces, and elders bowed their heads in quiet reflection. But this particular Independence Day was different. There was something in the air, something unspoken, a tension mixed with anticipation. For this year, a man who had left India decades ago, a man who had risen from modest streets to become one of the most influential voices in the world, was returning home with a gift that no one expected. His name was Sundar Pichai. The cameras were already waiting long before the official ceremonies began. Reporters whispered about rumors they could not confirm. Some said he had brought with him a technological marvel, something that would push India into a new age. Others claimed it was symbolic, perhaps a handwritten note or a historical artifact. But there were darker whispers too, suspicions that it might create tension rather than celebration. In the heart of Delhi, near the Red Fort where the Prime Minister would raise the national flag, the crowd pressed against barriers, their faces glowing with both pride and curiosity. Sundar Pichai stood quietly in a simple white kurta, blending into the moment as though he were not one of the most recognizable figures in the world. His calm eyes scanned the crowd, not with arrogance but with a kind of humility that felt rare in someone of his stature. He remembered the boy he once was, growing up in a small house in Chennai, where every phone call had to be shared, where a refrigerator was a luxury, and where each new piece of technology felt like magic. He remembered his father's patience, his mother's sacrifices, the warmth of neighbors who treated each other like family. Those memories had shaped him more than Silicon Valley ever could. Yet here he was, walking toward the Prime Minister of India, carrying in his hands a box that looked far too ordinary to be the subject of so much speculation. It was wooden, polished but simple, with no logos, no inscriptions, nothing that betrayed what lay inside. And that simplicity was perhaps what made it so unnerving. People leaned forward, cameras zoomed in, hearts beat faster. The world held its breath. The Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, extended his hand with the steady composure of a leader who had seen countless ceremonies. His eyes, however, flickered with curiosity as he looked at the box. Sundar bowed slightly before placing the gift in his hands. The silence that followed was deafening. In that pause, time seemed to stretch, as if the entire nation had leaned in closer. It was not the act of giving that unsettled people. After all, gifts had been exchanged countless times on this day. Flowers, books, art, symbols of culture and gratitude. What made this moment so charged was who Sundar Pichai was and what he represented. He was not just an executive, he was a son of India who had gone far away and yet remained tethered to its soil. He was proof of what resilience, humility, and quiet determination could achieve, and yet standing there he felt strangely vulnerable, as though this gift was not just a gesture but a piece of his soul exposed to judgment. Modi took the box and opened it carefully. The cameras tried to capture the inside, but the angle was hidden. Only a few standing close enough could see clearly, and their faces told the story first. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to astonishment, from calm to something that looked almost unsettled. Whispers began to ripple across the crowd, but the microphones could not catch the words. Then the camera found the Prime Minister's face, and for the first time in many years his composure cracked. His eyes widened, his lips parted slightly, and for a fleeting second, the leader of the largest democracy in the world looked utterly speechless. What could Sundar have given him? Was it something from his own childhood? A piece of India's forgotten history? Or perhaps something that revealed a truth no one was prepared to hear? As Modi held the object, the air grew even heavier. Sundar's mind raced back through the years to the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the days of scarcity, when his family lived without luxury, yet filled with dignity. He remembered how his father had saved money to buy him a ticket to America, believing in dreams bigger than their means. He remembered walking into Google for the first time, not knowing that one day he would lead it, not knowing that he would sit at tables where decisions shaped the very future of technology. And through it all, he remembered the quiet promise he had made to himself, that no matter how high he climbed, he would never forget the soil beneath his feet. The gift was born from that promise, but now, as Modi's face stiffened into unreadable silence, Sundar wondered if he had made a mistake. Reporters shouted questions, flashes from cameras lit the stage, but no answers came. The Prime Minister closed the box and nodded briefly, though his eyes were still locked on Sundar with a weight that felt both respectful and questioning. There was no smile, no easy acknowledgement, only a silence that felt like thunder waiting to break. The ceremony continued, but the world was no longer watching the speeches or the flag. It was watching Sundar Pichai and Narendra Modi, waiting for someone to explain what had just happened. Inside Sundar's heart, a storm was already brewing. He knew that the gift was powerful, not in the sense of money or technology, but in the way it touched upon history, memory, and identity. It was a reminder of something many had forgotten, and a symbol of something the world might not yet be ready to face. He had given it with respect, with humility, with hope. But hope could be fragile, and now he feared it might shatter. As he stepped back into the crowd, Sundar caught sight of a young boy waving a tiny flag and smiling at him with pure innocence. In that child's eyes, he saw something that steadied him, the same spark that once burned in his own heart when he was a boy in Chennai, dreaming of worlds beyond his reach. That spark was why he had brought the gift. That spark was why he believed it mattered. But the question remained. What had he just unleashed? The ceremony ended, the national anthem echoed across the red fort, and the tricolor waved high against the sky. But as the crowd began to disperse, the whispers only grew louder. News anchors interrupted their broadcasts, social media exploded with theories, and leaders around the world asked the same question. What did Sundar Pichai give Modi ji? And in the silence of that question, one truth became clear. Whatever it was, it had shaken even the strongest of men. As Sundar left the grounds, a call buzzed on his phone. The number was private, the voice urgent. It was not a journalist, not a colleague, not even a friend. It was someone he never expected to hear from on this day. And with that call, Sundar realized that the gift was no longer just his story. It was about to become the world's. The secret inside, the hours after the Independence Day ceremony, were unlike anything India had seen in years. Television anchors spoke with hurried voices, trying to fill the silence with speculation. News tickers scrolled endlessly, repeating the same question again and again. What did Sundar Pichai give Modi ji? The image of the wooden box, the fleeting shock on the Prime Minister's face, and the unreadable silence that followed replayed in a loop across every channel, every phone, every conversation. In the streets, people argued passionately. Some believed it was a piece of advanced technology, perhaps a prototype that could transform communication or energy or defense. Others thought it might be symbolic, maybe a letter from Sundar's childhood, or something deeply personal connected to India's struggle for freedom. But there were darker theories too, whispers of hidden motives, foreign influence, or political secrets meant to shake the nation. What disturbed people most was not knowing. The silence left too much room for imagination, and imagination often ran toward fear. Inside a quiet guest house in Delhi, Sundar sat alone, replaying the moment in his mind. He had not expected Modi's reaction to be so sharp, so revealing. He had thought the Prime Minister, a man seasoned with countless encounters and surprises, would take it calmly. Instead, Sundar had seen something rare, genuine shock, almost fear, hidden quickly behind the mask of leadership. Sundar knew then that the gift had struck a deeper chord than he had anticipated. He leaned back and closed his eyes, and memories from long ago rose uninvited. He saw his father, standing at a small workbench repairing electrical parts with steady hands. He saw his mother cooking simple meals, stretching every ingredient to feed the family. He saw himself, a young boy sharing a rotary phone with neighbors, waiting patiently for his turn while dreaming of a world beyond the limits of his street. These memories were not just nostalgia. They were the roots of the gift he had given. The gift was not about technology, not about wealth, but about memory, about carrying forward something that belonged not only to him but to every child who had ever grown up with dreams larger than their circumstances. But the question was, would others see it that way? The door opened quietly and one of his aides stepped in holding a phone. "Sir," the aide whispered, "calls are coming in nonstop. Journalists, officials, even people from Silicon Valley. Everyone wants a statement." Sundar shook his head gently. "Not yet," he said, "let them wonder." Outside, however, the storm only grew louder. Political opponents accused him of staging a spectacle. Admirers defended him, saying he had reminded India of its values. Analysts dissected every frame of the footage, pointing out the tension in Modi's eyes, the way Sundar's hands trembled slightly as he handed the box. Nothing escaped their scrutiny, and yet no one had the answer they craved. As night fell over Delhi, the speculation crossed borders. American networks ran segments on Sundar's rise from Chennai to California, linking his gift to global geopolitics. European commentators debated whether the gesture hinted at a new partnership between India and its diaspora. In every corner of the world, the simple act of giving a wooden box had become a mystery large enough to shake headlines. And yet, only two men knew the truth: Sundar and Modi. But Modi was silent. He had locked the box away after the ceremony, refusing to speak of it even to his closest advisors. His silence made the mystery darker, and darker still was the fact that he had summoned Sundar privately, away from cameras, away from the noise. Sundar prepared for that meeting with a calm face, though his heart was heavy. He had not meant to create a storm. He had only wanted to honor his country, to offer a piece of his soul back to the soil that had raised him. And yet, gifts carry weight not just in what they are, but in how they are seen. He wondered now if his act of respect would be mistaken for arrogance or worse, for something hidden. He sat at the table remembering his own journey. He thought of the day he first boarded a plane to America, the way his father's hands had pressed the ticket into his palm, the way his mother's eyes had glistened with both pride and worry. He thought of nights spent studying in small dorms, writing code by lamplight, unsure if he belonged. He thought of the long climb at Google, the setbacks and doubts, the voices that once dismissed him as too quiet, too humble, too different, and yet resilience had carried him. Kindness had guided him. Humility had kept him grounded. These were the values behind the gift. Values that could not be bought, could not be copied, but values too could be misunderstood. As he reflected, the phone on his desk buzzed again. It was a message this time, short and sharp. It read, "Meet me, tomorrow. No cameras, no advisors, only you and me." It was from Modi. Sundar exhaled, slowly. The meeting was inevitable, but the tone of the message made it clear. This was not going to be a simple exchange of gratitude. This was going to be something else entirely. The following morning, Delhi was still buzzing with speculation, but Sundar's car moved quietly through side streets, escorted without fanfare. He was taken to a quiet residence, far from the grand halls and ceremonial crowds. The house was simple, almost bare, its silence broken only by the sound of his footsteps as he was led inside. In a small room with plain walls, Modi was waiting. He sat at a wooden table, the same box in front of him. His expression was unreadable, his hands folded neatly, his eyes steady on Sundar. "Sit," Modi said softly. Sundar obeyed, lowering himself into the chair across from him. The silence stretched. No aides, no guards, no cameras. Only two men and the gift that had shaken the nation. "Why did you give me this?" Modi asked at last, his voice calm but heavy. Sundar opened his mouth, but for a moment no words came, because how could he explain that the gift was not just an object but a story? Not just a story but a memory. Not just a memory, but a promise. "Prime Minister," he said slowly, "I gave it because it belongs to India. It belongs to us all. It is not mine to keep but ours to remember." Modi's eyes narrowed. Do you know what you've done? Do you understand the power this carries? The box sat between them, closed but alive, as though the air itself bent around it. Sundar's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of responsibility. He knew that what lay inside could be seen in many ways. As hope, as history, as danger, the silence returned. Deeper now, thicker. And in that silence, Sundar realized something he had not expected. Modi's question was not one of anger, but of fear. Fear not for himself, but for what the world might do with the truth once it was revealed. The Prime Minister leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. This cannot remain between us. But once it leaves this room, the world will never be the same again. Sundar felt his heart pound. He had always believed the gift was about respect, humility, resilience, kindness. But now, sitting across from the leader of India, he realized it was also about something larger, something that could shift the weight of history itself. And as Modi's words settled in the air, one thought struck him with chilling clarity. The real story had only just begun. The private meeting. The room was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that calms the heart. It was the heavy silence that presses against the chest, that makes every breath sound louder than it should, that makes time stretch longer than it really is. Sundar sat across from the Prime Minister, the wooden box resting between them like a third presence, silent yet powerful. The Prime Minister's eyes never left him. Sundar had spoken before countless leaders, had testified in Congress, had stood on stages where the future of technology was debated by the brightest minds. He had faced questions designed to break him, accusations meant to corner him, doubts that echoed in headlines across the globe. But this moment was different. This was not about algorithms or business or policy. This was about identity, history, and truth. And Sundar felt the weight of it more heavily than anything he had faced before. Modi finally broke the silence. You know, Sundar, I have received many gifts in my life. Gold, jewels, manuscripts, ancient relics. Things meant to impress, things meant to flatter. But never have I been given something that makes me feel. He paused, searching for the word. Unsteady, his hand rested gently on the box. His fingers traced the smooth wood, but he did not open it. Instead, his gaze fixed firmly on Sundar, waiting for an explanation. Sundar leaned forward slightly, his voice soft. Sir, I did not bring it to unsettle you. I brought it because it is a reminder. It is not mine. It belongs to India, but it has been hidden for too long. Hidden? Modi asked, his tone sharp but curious. Yes, Sundar replied. Hidden not in vaults or archives, but in memory, forgotten by time, ignored by convenience. Yet it is part of who we are. Modi studied him carefully, his silence heavier than his words. The Prime Minister was no stranger to history, no stranger to symbols, no stranger to the power of memory. He knew that sometimes, one reminder could ignite a fire larger than armies. Sundar's thoughts drifted as he tried to find the right words. He remembered his father telling him stories late at night, stories of India's independence struggle, of leaders who sacrificed everything, of ordinary men and women who carried extraordinary courage. He remembered sitting on the floor of his small home, listening not just with his ears but with his heart, feeling those stories shape him. Those stories were not written in books he owned. They were carried in voices passed down like whispers of strength. The gift was born from that, but how could he explain it without revealing too much too soon? Modi leaned back, his expression unreadable. You know, Sundar, people see you as a man of technology, of Silicon Valley, of the modern world. They expect from you machines, devices, visions of the future. But what you gave me, it is not of the future. It is of the past. Tell me, why? Sundar inhaled slowly. Because the past is not gone, sir. It lives inside us. We build skyscrapers, we launch rockets, we create tools that connect billions. But beneath it all, we are still shaped by what came before. If we forget it, we lose ourselves. The gift is a reminder, not of what we can build, but of who we are. Prime Minister's eyes softened for the briefest moment but then hardened again. And do you believe the world is ready for such a reminder? Sundar hesitated. He knew the truth. The world was never truly ready for reminders that cut deep. The world wanted comfort, not discomfort, progress without reflection, pride without sacrifice. Yet the gift was not about readiness. It was about necessity. Whether the world is ready or not, Sundar said quietly, the truth remains. Modi tapped his fingers lightly against the box. The sound echoed in the small room, each tap like the ticking of a clock counting down. Do you know what will happen if this becomes public? He asked. Do you understand the storm you may have unleashed? Sundar nodded. Yes, but I also know that storms clear the air. They reveal what was hidden behind the clouds. For a moment, neither man spoke. Outside the window, Delhi moved on with its daily chaos. Honking cars, street vendors calling out, children laughing in alleys. The world outside was noisy, alive, ordinary. But inside this room, history itself was being negotiated in silence. Then Modi leaned forward, lowering his voice. Tell me, Sundar. Tell me the story behind this gift. Tell me why you chose this day, this place, this moment. Sundar's throat tightened. He had known this moment would come, but facing it now was harder than he imagined. He felt again, like the boy in Chennai, clutching a notebook filled with dreams too large for his world, wondering if anyone would understand. When I was a boy, Sundar began slowly, my father taught me that true strength was not in how much we had, but in how much we remembered. He used to say memory is a kind of wealth. We were not rich, but we had stories. We had dignity. And those stories shaped everything I became. This gift, it carries one of those stories. Not my story alone, but a story that belongs to India. A story that belongs to every child who grew up believing that resilience and humility could carry them farther than wealth ever could. His voice faltered for a moment, then grew stronger. It is a promise I made to myself, that if I ever had the chance, I would bring this story back to where it belonged. And that is why I placed it in your hands, sir, because it is not a gift to you as a man. It is a gift to India through you. The Prime Minister listened in silence, his face unreadable, his fingers still resting on the box. His eyes, however, betrayed something. Not anger, not suspicion, but a weight. A recognition that whatever lay inside was larger than politics, larger than power. After a long pause, Modi whispered, Then you must be prepared, Sundar, because once this is seen, the world will never look at you, or at India, the same way again. The room grew colder, the silence sharper. Sundar realized that this was not just about honoring the past anymore. This was about reshaping the present. And just as he gathered his courage to speak again, Modi slowly pushed the box across the table, closer to Sundar, and said words that froze him in place. You may have carried it here, Sundar, but now the burden belongs to both of us. The question is, are you ready to share it with the world? Sundar's breath caught in his throat. For all his preparation, for all his humility and resilience, he had not expected those words. Because in that single sentence, the Prime Minister was not just acknowledging the gift, he was binding Sundar to it, tying his destiny to something far larger than he had ever imagined. And in that instant, Sundar realized with a chill that the true test of his life was not behind him, but ahead. The storm, when Sundar left the quiet room where the gift had been discussed, the air outside felt heavier than before, as if even the sky understood that something had shifted. He carried no papers, no notes, not even the box, yet his hands felt weighted as though he were holding the future. The streets of Delhi were still crowded with celebration, flags waving, music rising, children running with joy. But to Sundar, it all felt strangely distant, as if he were moving through a world that no longer belonged to the present. He had entered that meeting as a man with a gesture. He left it as a man with a burden. By evening, the rumors had already grown sharper. Television anchors no longer spoke in soft speculation. They argued fiercely with one another. One said the gift was a warning. Another said it was a promise. A third suggested it was an artifact stolen from the past. Across social media, theories multiplied like wildfire. Some declared Sundar a patriot who had reminded India of its soul. Others accused him of seeking attention, of staging a moment to strengthen his image globally. Hashtags trended, news panels filled, and yet no one truly knew the truth. The real danger, however, was not in what people said, but in how quickly sides were forming. In Silicon Valley, his colleagues at Google sent polite but urgent questions asking what exactly had been handed over to a world leader. Some investors whispered about risk, about how personal gestures could ripple into corporate crises. In Washington, quiet discussions stirred about whether an American citizen should be offering such a powerful symbol to another government. In Delhi, opposition parties used the moment to question Modi's silence, demanding he explain what had unsettled him so visibly. Sundar watched all of this unfold from the window of his guest house, his face calm, but his chest heavy. He had known it would cause noise, but he had not expected the storm to build so quickly or so fiercely. It was like standing in the eye of a cyclone, the winds circling tighter, waiting for the moment when they would crash into him directly. And then, just as he tried to gather his thoughts, a message reached him that changed the rhythm of his heart. It was a letter, hand-delivered, unsigned, but written with a precision that felt both careful and threatening. The letter said only this: "The gift you gave is not yours to share. If the truth comes out, it will not only break nations, it will break you. Do not make the mistake of believing kindness will protect you. Silence is your only shield." Sundar held the paper for a long time, his fingers trembling slightly. He had faced criticism, doubt, and misunderstanding many times before. But this was different. This was not argument or speculation. This was a warning. Someone out there did not want the truth revealed, someone who understood what the gift meant and feared its power. He leaned back, closing his eyes. Again he remembered his childhood, the voice of his father telling him that resilience was not about strength alone, but about standing firm when everything pushed against you. His father had lived a life of quiet battles, fighting to save. For his son's education, fighting to keep dignity in the face of scarcity. Sundar had inherited that quiet battle, and now it rose within him again. But as much as he wished to stay steady, the storm was growing louder. The next day, newspapers carried headlines not just in India, but around the world. "Mystery gift shakes India," one declared. "Tech leader or political disruptor," another asked. In London, a columnist suggested the gift was connected to colonial history, perhaps a piece of India's past returned. In Beijing, a paper hinted darkly at hidden alliances. Every country seemed eager to fit the story into its own narrative, twisting the meaning before the truth could be known. And among all this noise, a new voice rose. A rival. He was another leader in the world of technology, ambitious, sharp, always eager to challenge Sundar's influence. Until now, his criticisms had been about business decisions, about strategies of innovation. But now he stepped into the storm, speaking on television with a smile too practiced to be innocent. "Symbols are powerful," he said, "but they can also be dangerous. When someone in a position of global responsibility offers a gift that unsettles leaders, one must ask, was it really an act of respect, or was it something else? Perhaps a signal, perhaps a challenge. I believe the world deserves to know the truth before it is too late." His words spread quickly, feeding suspicion. Suddenly, Sundar was no longer seen simply as a humble man with a gift. He was painted by some as a strategist, a manipulator, even a disruptor with hidden intentions. It was not just his gesture under scrutiny now, but his character. Through it all, Sundar remained outwardly calm, speaking little, offering no explanations. He knew that words could be twisted, but silence could also be misread. He walked a thin line, unsure which path carried greater danger. That night, as he sat alone in his room, the storm outside matched the storm within. Thunder rolled across the sky. Rain lashed against the windows, and the city seemed to tremble. Sundar sat at the desk, the letter still lying before him, the warning echoing in his mind. He thought of humility, of kindness, of resilience. the values that had guided him since childhood. But values were not shields, they were lights. And light could only guide if one dared to walk forward into the dark. His phone buzzed again. A new message. This one was from someone unexpected. Not a politician, not a journalist, but an old acquaintance from his early days at Google. The message was short, almost cryptic. I know what the gift means. Meet me. Tomorrow. Before it is too late. Sundar stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The world was swirling with noise. Rivals were twisting the story. Warnings were being delivered in the shadows. And now, someone from his past was stepping forward with knowledge he did not expect. For the first time, Sundar realized the storm was no longer just around him. It was closing in. And somewhere deep inside, he knew. The next step would not only test his resilience, but might determine whether the gift became a light for the world, or a weapon in the wrong hands. The test of resilience, the storm outside, had not passed. If anything, it had grown stronger. What began as whispers in the streets of Delhi had turned into a global argument, a fire that refused to die. The image of Sundar handing the wooden box to the Prime Minister was still looping endlessly on television screens, still being shared, millions of times online, still being dissected by experts who claimed to read meaning in every gesture, every flicker of the eye. But now the discussion had shifted. It was no longer about what the gift might contain. It was about what Sundar himself represented. In the quiet of his guest house, Sundar sat alone, the curtains drawn to block out the flashes of cameras waiting outside. He had been advised to make a statement, to explain, to calm the frenzy. Yet, every time he picked up a pen or opened his mouth to draft words, something inside him resisted. The gift was not something to be explained in shallow sentences or reduced to sound bites. It was not a product launch, not a press release. It was a truth, and truths could not be polished for convenience. They had to be lived even when they came at great cost. But that cost was now becoming painfully clear. The letter he had received still lay on his desk, its words sharp in his memory. Silence is your only shield. Each time he thought about it, he felt a chill crawl through his body. Who had written it? A political figure? A rival from Silicon Valley? Someone hidden in the shadows of history, who feared that the truth would destroy their carefully built illusions? The not knowing was as heavy as the threat itself. Worse still, the rival who had spoken against him was gaining ground. Interviews, articles, panels, everywhere he appeared he spoke with confidence, framing Sundar as a man who had blurred the line between humility and manipulation. Leaders must be careful, he would say smoothly, when they play with symbols that belong to nations, not to individuals. The world was listening, and for the first time in years, Sundar felt his reputation slipping away not because of failure, but because of silence. He turned to the window. Outside, the city pulsed with noise. Car horns, voices, rain dripping, steadily from rooftops. But Sundar was far away, lost in memory again. He remembered long nights in his student dormitory in America, when he felt like a stranger in a land too vast, too cold, too different from the streets of Chennai. He had often felt invisible then, his voice drowned out by louder ones, his presence questioned. But it was in those lonely nights that he discovered resilience, the ability to keep walking, to keep learning, to keep building even when no one believed in him. Resilience, his father had once told him, was like water. It did not shout. It did not demand. It simply kept flowing, finding its way through rock, through earth, until it reached where it was meant to go. Sundar had carried those words with him all his life, and now, as the world threatened to crush him under suspicion, he knew that resilience was once again the only path forward. But resilience did not mean hiding. Resilience meant standing. He opened his laptop and stared at the blank screen. Millions of people were waiting, not for speculation, not for rumors, but for him. He knew he could not let rivals shape the meaning of the gift. He knew he could not let fear dictate silence. He had to speak, not to defend himself, but to remind the world of the truth that had guided his entire life. And yet, he hesitated. Because once he spoke, there would be no going back. The gift would no longer be a private story, a quiet symbol between him and his country. It would become public, exposed to interpretation, to distortion, to attacks he could not control. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the laptop again. He needed clarity. He needed strength. The following morning before dawn, Sundar left the guest house quietly, avoiding cameras and guards. He went alone, walking through narrow streets that reminded him of his boyhood. The city was still asleep, the sky pale with the first light of morning, and for the first time in days he felt a kind of peace. He found himself drawn to a small temple on the edge of the neighborhood. It was simple, unadorned, with chipped walls and faintly ringing bells. He stepped inside and sat cross-legged on the cool stone floor. The air smelled of incense, faint but grounding. He closed his eyes, and for a long time, he said nothing, asked for nothing. He simply listened. To the quiet, to the beating of his own heart, to the echo of his father's voice telling him to stand firm, to be kind, to remember. Tears welled in his eyes, not from fear, but from the weight of memory. He thought of his mother's soft hands brushing his forehead when he was ill, of his neighbors sharing food when his family had little, of his father walking miles to save for his education. These were the roots of the gift. It was not wealth, not power, but memory, humility, resilience, kindness. And in that temple, Sundar realized that no rival, no threat, no storm could strip that truth from him. When he rose, he felt lighter. He knew now what he had to do. He would not remain silent. He would not let others twist the meaning of the gift into something it was not. He would speak, not just to India, not just to leaders, but to the world. He would tell the story as it truly was, raw and honest, without polish, without fear. That evening, his aides were shocked when he called them together and told them his decision. "We will hold a gathering," Sundar said. Not a press conference, not a corporate event. A gathering of people, ordinary people, students, families, workers. I will tell the story directly to them, and through them, to the world. "Sir," one of them whispered, "this will be dangerous. If you reveal the truth, you may face consequences you cannot imagine." Sundar nodded. "I know, but silence is a greater danger. Silence allows others to shape the story. And this story is not theirs. It belongs to all of us." The date was set. The place chosen. A stage was prepared, simple and open, where Sundar would stand not as a CEO, not as a public figure, but as a son of India speaking to his people. The night before the event, Sundar stood alone again, staring at the wooden box that had started it all. He placed his hand gently on its surface, and in that moment he whispered to himself, "This is not about me. This is about us. Whatever happens tomorrow, let it serve as light, not as weapon." He did not know how the world would react. He did not know if his words would heal or divide. He did not know if the rival waiting in the shadows would strike harder. All he knew was that the time had come. As the clock ticked past midnight, Delhi slept restlessly, the world watching, waiting. And Sundar prepared himself to step into the light, carrying not just a gift, but the truth. And deep in his heart, he understood. One wrong word could destroy him, but the right words, spoken with humility and courage, could change the world forever. The world's response. The morning of the gathering broke with an air of unease, as though the city itself was holding its breath. Delhi's streets, usually chaotic with horns and chatter, carried a strange kind of quiet beneath the noise, the kind of quiet that lingers before a storm. Crowds had begun to gather near the open grounds chosen for Sundar's address. Students came carrying flags. Workers arrived still in their uniforms. Families sat together on the grass, their children restless but curious. Across the world, cameras were trained on the stage, broadcasting live to millions. The mystery of the gift had stretched for days, feeding speculation and fear, but now the man at the center of it was about to speak. No politician, no rival, no analyst, only Sundar himself. When he finally stepped onto the stage, the murmurs quieted. He wore the same simple white kurta as on Independence Day, his posture calm, his face steady. But those who looked closely saw the weight in his eyes. This was not the face of a CEO unveiling a product. This was the face of a son returning to speak to his people, carrying a burden heavier than technology, heavier than business, heavier even than reputation. For a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched across the field, across the cameras, across the millions of viewers watching on their screens. He let the quiet settle, let the weight of anticipation press down until the only sound was the rustling of flags in the wind. Then he spoke, his voice soft but clear. I was born in this country, like so many of you, in a small home with few possessions. I grew up waiting my turn to use the phone, studying under the dim light of a lamp, dreaming of worlds that felt far beyond my reach. My father saved for years so I could study abroad. My mother sacrificed her comforts so I could have a chance. Everything I have become I owe to the values I learned here: humility, resilience, kindness, respect. The crowd listened, rapt, as he continued. When I left for America, I carried those values with me. They guided me through doubt, through failure, through nights when I wondered if I belonged. They guided me even when I stood in places of power, surrounded by voices louder than mine, and they guided me when I chose to bring a gift on Independence Day. Not a gift of technology, not of wealth, but of memory. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. The box I placed in the hands of our Prime Minister does not contain machines or secrets. It contains something far greater, a piece of our forgotten story. Inside it rests a small diary, handwritten by a young boy during the years of our struggle for freedom. That boy was no leader, no soldier, no name you would know. He was simply an ordinary child, watching his parents fight silently for dignity. His words are filled not with speeches, but with feelings, hunger, fear, hope, and above all, resilience. A murmur ran through the crowd, soft but growing. Sundar's voice trembled slightly as he went on. That diary belonged to a child who lived on the same street where my father once walked. It was found by chance, preserved quietly by a neighbor, passed from hand to hand until it came to me. When I read it, I saw not just history but reflection, of my childhood, of our shared struggles, of every boy and girl who has ever believed in a tomorrow brighter than today. I knew then that it was not mine to keep. It belonged here, in India, in the hands of those who lead. So they too remember that greatness is built not only by leaders but by ordinary hearts who never gave up. The silence in the field deepened. People leaned closer, eyes glistening, breaths caught in their throats.